Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Regeneration, Housing and Environment Scrutiny Commission. Can everybody present hear me? Now, if you can, please raise your hand like so. Yeah, I can see everybody. Yeah, thank you very much. This evening's meeting will be held virtually via Zoom. The Council has decided that while we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, public meetings will be held virtually for the meantime to keep councillors, officers and members of the public as safe as possible. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting via Newham's YouTube on the Council's YouTube page. May I ask members to note they must raise their hand, and we'll do it physically in order to indicate that when they wish to speak. I also want to remind members that if a vote is taken at any time, it'll be by the way of raising your hand, as we have just done, so that we can capture this on the screen. This meeting of the London Borough of Newham Regeneration, Housing and Environment Scrutiny Commission is now called to order. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Councillor. So we've got apologies from Councillor Tahura tonight because she's at the COVID-19 testing group.
Right, thank you, Richard. Are there any members wishing to make any declarations of interest? No. Well, now, could we please look at the minutes? I'm sure I'm addressing myself now just to the Commission members. Would you like to have a look at the minutes for accuracy and to see if there are any matters arising? I'll just consult my screen. Excuse me a moment. The minutes begin on page 5. So are there any questions about accuracy on page 5, page 6, page 7? I would just like to make a couple of points about 5-7. Page 7, number 7, that's at the top of the page. It's just I think the word needs is missing there. On the 4th line, the borough had significantly less complex needs, I think it is there, right? And were easier to accommodate. And a bit further down, yeah, thank you. A bit further down, resolved key points raised in the discussion. 2, I think is that chat. Should that be chat box there near the end? That's on the 3rd line from the bottom. Implementation of a chat box, should that be? I think.
Let me just check on that 1 second. No, chatbot is accurate. It is.
Oh, really? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's meant to be a.
I forgot that was. Well, that was good.
Yeah,
there's no problem there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Accuracy for page 8. Page 9, page 10. I've got something on page 10 I would just like to raise. And so, Jane.
Is it accurate in point 3 on page 9?
Sorry.
Begun in October 2020 and was due to end January 2020. Is that correct?
Is that the consultation, Councillor?
Yes.
Yep. No, that is accurate.
No,
It's going
it
to
should be,
end
it should be
before it
January
began.
20. Should be
Oh, sorry,
January 21.
2021. Cool.
Sounds
Yeah.
like
No
it,
apologies. I'll amend that. Yeah.
Well spotted, Jane. I hadn't got that one down. Good. Page 10. Page 10, number 8. It's on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th line with however, and then goes on to line 6. However, members were asked. However, members.
John, I think we just delete the word there, were. So members asked whether
That's
they
it.
felt they were.
Yes.
Members asked. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the members asked, I think, isn't it?
We don't ask whether we
asked.
want to enter poverty. There's enough people in poverty without some members entering it as well. So.
Well, you never know. You never know what's going to happen, do you? But that's
No.
right, Neil. That's it. I think that was
Yeah.
the problem there. It's members asked and not were asked.
That's fine. I can amend those.
That's really good. Well, that's page 10, page 11, and that's it. Okay. Thank you very much. Are we agreed that the minutes are now an accurate record of the last meeting? Yep.
Mhm.
Agreed. All right, thank you.
Make those minor amendments and then the entered in.
Yeah, just minor points, Richard. Thank you. We now come to agenda item 4, the homelessness strategy. In this item, we'll be aiming to understand the pressures that have been placed upon the homelessness service as a result of the introduction of the Homelessness Reduction Act and the council's plans to manage new placement demand in temporary accommodation. And for this, I'm delighted to welcome our witnesses today, Councillor Shaban Mohammed, Lead Member for Housing Services, Darren Levy, Director for Housing, and Candida Thompson, Director of Temporary Accommodation. So welcome to the meeting. I'm pleased you're able to join us for this item. And
thank you for the invitation.
Nice to see you all here. And before we've got lots of questions to ask you, but before would one or all of you like to just give us a brief introduction to this report?
Darren, do you want to start, or Candida?
I'm happy to pass to Candida. I mean, just this was that there's a lot of, we're obviously aware of the pressure on temporary accommodation. We're aware of the dire housing need within Newham. So this report really was just setting out those pressures and also providing some visibility of our high level plans. Under each work stream, there are more detailed plans that are being sort of worked on and implemented on a weekly basis. And I'll pass over to Candida if you want Candida to take you through the key work streams, or would you just like to open it to questions?
We have got some questions, but perhaps if Candida could take us briefly through it, that would be very helpful for us.
Okay, would you like me to take you through the paper and the kind of more techie stuff about the Homelessness Reduction Act and kind of the reasons why that has put a burden on us, or would you like me to go straight to the presentation bit about
well, I think we have time. If you'd like to take us through it, I think we have time and would welcome that. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, fine.
Thank you,
just
Candida.
to say, I don't have a printer at home, so I'm going to have to go through the paper on the screen. So if I won't be able to see you all, so if you've got something that you want to interject about, please shout.
Well, what we'll do, we'll probably ask you. Well, we'll certainly ask you questions about it afterwards, right?
Okay, right. I'm just going to go and look at my paper. So Okay, so as we've already said, this report is just basically a sort of high-level outline, just to outline the pressures that were placed on the service as a result of the Homelessness Reduction Act 2017, or it will be known further in the report as the HRA, and our plans to manage the new placement demand in temporary accommodation through refocusing our service onto a prevention-based approach to homelessness. So just as a background, the Homelessness Reduction Act, it was basically one of the biggest changes in homelessness legislation, some people say for a generation, but at least for 20 years. And it placed, what it did was kind of plug in new duties on top of the existing homelessness duties that were there in the Housing Act of 1996. And the new duties, these new duties basically require local authorities to take reasonable steps to try and prevent or relieve a household's homelessness by helping them to secure accommodation for at least 6 months. And the duties last for 56 days each. So you owe that duty for that 56-day period, and you need to do something to secure accommodation within that period. So what the Act also did was it introduced a new duty for local authorities to assess the support needs of every member of the household who was applying to the council, and to consider how those needs might need to be met through a personal housing plan, which was another thing that was introduced with the legislation. So everybody you're required to undertake a personal housing plan with, and take into account their support needs, which would help them sustain accommodation either that they're in or new accommodation that you might find them. Excuse me. So if you all have the papers in front of you, I've outlined the prevention duties between paragraphs 3.4 and 3.7, but there is a diagram in the paper which I'm going to go to, and it's probably easier to take you through that if you can look at that, because I think it kind of clarifies how the duties work at which point. So if you can all see the diagram. First of all, if we take the prevention duty, the duty on the local authority is to take reasonable steps to help the applicant to secure accommodation does not cease to be available. So that's preventing homelessness, and it applies to all eligible applicants, eligible meaning you know, eligibility for access to public funds, who are threatened with homelessness within 56 days. So anybody who is eligible and who is threatened with homelessness within 56 days must receive a personalised housing plan and assistance from us to prevent their homelessness. So the prevention duty that exists for 56 days, it only ends if we prevent that household's homelessness. If that 56 days expires and we still haven't prevented the homelessness, if they become homeless in that period, or if they deliberately and unreasonably refuse to cooperate is the legislation. So that is something that's very difficult for us to kind of prove, and that's not something we very often use to enter duty. So basically all eligible applicants that we haven't prevented their homelessness and we haven't ended the duty because they unreasonably refused to cooperate, if the 56 days has expired, they will then move on to the relief duty. So the duty to relieve homelessness means that we need to take reasonable steps to help them secure suitable accommodation. So we don't have to provide accommodation to everybody at that point. We need to assist them with securing suitable accommodation. But if they're homeless and they're eligible and they're in priority need, or they look to be in priority need, then we will need to provide them interim accommodation at that point. So that's temporary accommodation, whilst we continue to try and relieve their homelessness. So the duty ends here, again, if the 56 days elapses, if there's deliberate, unreasonable refusing to cooperate, or if we offer accommodation that's suitable and that person refuses it.
Just can I jump in, Chair?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
It's only the one refusal.
If it's a refusal of a suitable offer of accommodation that has been made formally, we can end the duty legally. That doesn't mean that we always do.
You see where I'm going with this, Candida? What's the definition of flexibility within this? Are we allowed to give them more than one offer if we feel that it may not have been a fit?
We're allowed.
Okay, John. Sorry, I'm
that's fine.
Yeah, no, we're allowed to give them more than one offer.
Yeah.
What the legislation says is the terms under which you can end that duty legally.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So, but also, if that offer isn't suitable, then we can't end that duty. So they can ask at that point for a review of the suitability of the offer of accommodation. And then there is a lot of legislation and case law about what a suitable offer of accommodation is.
I'm going to say it can be.
Yeah.
Could be here for hours with lawyers on that one.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, this is a very boiled down version. But okay, so if the homelessness hasn't been relieved within 56 days and the other reasons for ending the duty haven't been used, and somebody is in priority need, they're not intentionally homeless, and they remain homeless, then they move on to the main duty. And the reason that I've got this in a different colour is because this is the duty that existed before the Homelessness Reduction Act. So you can see that everything that's come before this is additional duties. And not only that, those additional duties are owed to far more people than this main housing duty that we used to operate under. So basically, after we go through those two stages, or somebody might apply to us when they're actually homeless and then we can't prevent, but after we go through those stages, we meet our main duty, which is to secure accommodation is available for occupation by the applicant. So here, this is when we do an assessment now of whether people are in priority need. I don't know whether, do you want me to go into the priority need categories?
Well, we have, there is a new strategy, isn't there, which we actually looked at last time. But you can go into it briefly, perhaps.
Okay.
Because we particularly want to know what exists perhaps now and what's being proposed, perhaps. The difference would be interesting.
Well, priority need is a term under the legislation. So basically, when you get to this point, you need to assess whether the council has a duty to people because they are in priority need for housing. So that will be people who have dependent children, people who are less able to fend when homeless because of mental health or physical disability or special circumstances such as they've been institutionalized through prison, they're less able to cope as a result of domestic violence, people who are elderly, young people 16, 17, and some other categories, but they're the main categories. So you can see that previous to this duty, we weren't really taking those things into account, but now this is where we have to sort of do much more assessment of that and make a decision as to whether somebody is priority need. What we also need to look at is whether somebody is intentionally homeless, which is they have done something intentionally which has meant that their accommodation is no longer available to them. And this duty only ends with an offer of suitable settled accommodation, and that can be a private rented sector offer of at least 12 months. So that means a tenancy of at least 12 months in the private rented sector, or it's secure social housing. Okay. Any questions there?
Riaz has got a question.
John, can I ask, when you say that you decide whether someone is intentionally homeless,
Yeah.
does that include because they're unable to pay their rent and they get kicked out?
No, it would be if they refused to pay their rent. So there's a difference. Intentionally homeless is a deliberate act.
Yeah, but
So you have to prove in your decision that there was a deliberate act that led to that person losing their accommodation.
if they
So if they were in rent arrears because, for example, they became redundant, they took out a private rented sector tenancy, which when they were working, they were perfectly able to afford. Then they became redundant and they were no longer able to afford their rent. That would not be intentional homelessness.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And the other thing to say is at all these stages, whenever we make any of these formal decisions under the legislation about if somebody is in priority need, if somebody is intentionally homeless, they have the right to review. They have a right to a statutory review of that decision. So, it's quite a robust, thorough legal process under legislation that we go through to make those decisions.
Can I just ask?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Chair. If they are intentionally homeless, what is your next step? And what would that depend upon?
So if we find somebody intentionally homeless, we don't owe them a duty to house them. So what would usually happen is that we would make them we would end our duty towards them, or we would not accept a duty towards them, and we would look to assist them with finding accommodation in the private rented sector, but they wouldn't be eligible to go on the waiting list for secure tenancy, and they wouldn't be eligible to remain in temporary accommodation.
Right. And would that be regardless of who they were, or whether they had dependents, or their situation?
If they have dependents and we don't have a duty to house them, we have a duty to refer them to children's social care to do an assessment of them. So in some circumstances, children's social care will take over responsibility for that family. What I have to stress is things are very different now because of this new legislation, though. As you can see from that diagram, it's very far in the process now where we even have to look at intentional homelessness. Really, it's not a big issue now, because all the emphasis is on whether we can prevent or relieve people's homelessness before they get to that main duty decision. And at that point, we're blind. The legislation is blind to intentionality. It's blind to priority need, and it's blind to local connection as well, which is very, very different from how it used to be. So the result of this legislation is that actually, if you're focusing on your prevention and your relief duties, decisions about intentional homelessness are massively reduced.
Yep, well, I think we can see the shift in emphasis, and that's very interesting to have you take us through those diagrams. I think what we'll do now, Candida, we've got some questions for you, which can be answered by yourself or the other witnesses.
Okay.
And we are going to actually explore what you've just explained to us and about Newham's performance on this issue. And I think Neil has got the first question, I believe. But he's muted. He's muted.
I don't know whether Lakmini had an urgent thing before we start the questions that we've got as key lines of inquiry, though. John.
Sorry, did
Lakmini was waving.
Oh, sorry,
before.
I didn't see her. She's
okay.
not on my view. Okay, I'll take Lakmini then. Thank you, Neil. I didn't see her on the screen yet.
Thank you, Neil, and
Lakmini.
thank you, John. Yeah, it's just on the presentation, you mentioned about duty to prevent homelessness and duty to relieve homelessness. I didn't quite catch what the difference was.
Okay, so the duty to prevent homelessness is if someone's threatened with homelessness within 56 days. So that means, for example, if they've been living with their family and their family has told them they have to move out in a month's time, they're threatened with homelessness. The duty to relieve is when people are actually homeless. So that would kick in, for example, when people might turn up to the housing advice service and they're already homeless with their bags with them. And then we have a duty to relieve homelessness. So so people can actually move from, even though the prevention duty will last for 56 days, if people become homeless within that 56 days, then the relief duty will kick in. Does that? It's quite, yeah, it's quite complicated.
Yeah,
but
no, thank you.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I thought. So, did I see Belgica waving with a question?
Yes, before our
Yes,
standard one, she was waving as well. You see, so I think it's
Thank
points
you.
of clarification they wanted. So yeah.
No, I got two questions, please. The first one is, how many times a person can refuse the offer? And also, if there are a specific reason they are refusing. Thank you.
Okay, so there are different answers to that depending on what duty we are owing. Okay, so if we owe somebody a prevention duty, we can make them an offer of accommodation and they can turn it down, and that's, that doesn't really affect them. If we owe them a relief duty and so they're homeless and we have, say, found them accommodation in the private rented sector, and we've assessed it and we've said this is suitable for you for these reasons, it's the right size for your family, we think it's affordable for you, we think it's within reasonable travelling distance of your support networks, etc., and they turn that down, we can at that point end our relief duty towards them. With a main housing duty, if we offer them accommodation and they turn that down, again, we can end that main housing duty and we will no longer owe them a duty at all. So your second part of your question was, why do people turn down accommodation? There are all sorts of reasons for it. A lot of the time it could be because they feel that it's not near enough to their family or their support networks. Sometimes they don't like the accommodation or where it is, or they think that it might have too many stairs, or lots and lots of reasons. And within all those reasons, we have to look at that and we have to make an assessment against the legislation, what it says about what a suitable offer is, and all the case law about it, because there's absolutely loads of case law about it, of whether that is suitable within the context of the housing legislation, which might not be what people would commonly think is necessarily sort of suitable or reasonable.
Right, thank you. Yeah, it's useful for us to know this because we have lots of residents come to us with cases of this sort, and sometimes it's difficult to work out the subtleties of the regulations.
Yeah.
Well, so thank you very much, Candida.
I'm not giving way to Riaz, so we've got to start our questions, I think.
Yes, I think we'll start.
He's now waving.
I think, well, we've got questions. See, our questions
Mine's
now
got a
are
short
about
one,
the
John.
work you're doing rather than about our understanding of it.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have to go ahead now.
Yeah.
Okay, so do
Somebody else can
off?
come in a bit later if you've got a question. So I think Neil has got a question to start us off on this stage.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you very much for your introductions, Candida. Just one little point on the report that's in front of us. You've got just a, it's on 4.3. We've still got references to currently XXX in temporary accommodation and are forecasting a XX million pressure on the TA budget. So just thought, we'll just have that now. This is the policy working side of me coming out. Yes.
Yeah, we were finalising. We're still finalising the period 9.
Exactly, and that's coming in another process.
I can tell you that the numbers in temporary accommodation at the moment are 5,788. 5,788. So to put that in context for you, when we're talking about the increase in pressure on the service and just the huge demand that this put on us, in 2016 to 17, at the end of that year, we had 4,457 in temporary accommodation.
Yep.
So you can see that's a huge increase. And as I put in the report, the numbers of applications of homelessness from that year to the year after the Homelessness Reduction Act, the numbers of applications doubled as well. So, you can see the pressure. I mean, I can tell you a bit of good news is that, in the last month, numbers in temporary accommodation have reduced by 32 for the first month in recent memory. But yes, for a long time the trajectory has been upwards, and this is why we've kind of put this high level plan in place with the work streams underneath to
sorry, I'm rushing her a bit because there's others to come in, and we've got 7 questions, and that wasn't even my main one. That was just a clarification. 4.5 rightly describes that the factors contribute to Newham having the highest number of households, but with a comparator between Newham and the rest of London. My question is focused on what have other comparable local authorities done to undertake the prevention and relief function of the HRA. How do these actions compare with what Newham has undertaken, particularly as the council has one of the lowest rates of homelessness prevention, as you see, 38 compared with a London average of 51%, and the highest levels of households in temporary accommodation anywhere in the country is stated in the report. So do you see what I wanted to know what the figure was? You got all of that?
So I'm not sure I did get all of that. I got that you wanted to know what we were doing comparable with other authorities, but I'm not sure I'm clear on the second part of the question.
Let's do the first bit then. Is that all right, Chair? Okay. So can we break it up?
I think that's the essence of the question, in fact.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is outlined in. Are we going to go through the slides on the presentation or not, or we just?
No, I think we'll go into the questions now.
Okay, fine. No, so what we're doing is basically outlined in the other document that is appendix
Yeah.
to the report.
Yeah.
And there are a number of work streams within that. Now all of those are based on kind of best practice from other authorities that I've worked in, or that I've worked with through London councils, or through I'm on the executive of an organisation called the Association of Housing Advisory Services, and we get together with all the local authorities in London and kind of talk about best practice and what each other are doing. So these are things that other local authorities have already put in and have had in place for quite a long time. And you will see that the authorities who do well with preventions, like Camden, Lambeth, and some other authorities like that, have had these kind of things in place because they very early on took a kind of prevention approach to homelessness, even before the Homelessness Reduction Act came in. But when the Homelessness Reduction Act came in, they restructured their service to kind of front end it onto prevention and relief. So as you can see from the table that you refer to, what has been happening in Newham is that we're only getting to see at the moment the people in the prevention stage where we can really do something to stop them from being homeless. Far too with seeing them sort of not enough of them, basically 38% of them compared with 51% in the rest of London. So that's immediately reduced our ability to prevent homelessness. And then when we do try and prevent homelessness with them, we're only being successful with 26% of those, with where we compare it with the average of 51% for the rest of London.
Can I just
so
come
what
back
we need to do is we need to widen that window of opportunity by being far more proactive and reaching out to people who are at that threatened with homelessness stage, or about to go into that threatened with homelessness stage, and work with them to do their personal housing plans at that point. And so that's what a lot of these work streams are geared towards.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just conscious of time.
I'll give you a supplement. One
You're allowed
supplementary,
only one, you see.
Neil, only
I knew
one,
you were
so
going to
make
say
it
that.
good.
I wanted to get it in quick. On the appendix, it rightly talks about data and performance, using data for this upstream prevention that you've referred to, performance monitoring and quality control. I'm looking at the coloured, landscape, isn't it called, at that pack. And then it says prevention relief restructure. I presume that means in terms of the officers and the service team that's doing it, the restructure in terms of personnel, improve decision times in case handling, improve prevention office, etc. All I want to know, Chair, through you, Chair, from Candida or Shabs or Darren, whoever can answer this, is, are we using a set of sort of agreed parameters that are sort of like consistent with other local authorities on what good looks like? Does that make sense? Yep. Sorry, I'm wearing a sort of quality assurance hat at the moment, as well as a policy type approach on that. Yeah. How are we assured as a scrutiny function that we've got the right sort of ducks in a row, as it were? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I can answer that. Yes, we are, is the simple answer. What we do is all local authorities in England are required to give back statutory returns about our performance against all sorts of things, and they're called H-click returns. And at the moment, I can't exactly remember what H-click stands for, but basically it's all the data that we are required to collect, which is another reason why this has been such a huge demand on the services, because when this act was introduced, the statutory reporting that was made mandatory along with it was increased hugely. So we have to report on how people presented to us, what their support needs are, you know, where they came from, what kind of properties they were living in beforehand, whether we owe them a prevention duty, a relief duty, how that duty was ended, if that then moved on to a main housing duty. So all of these things, and they're all reported and made available through the government website. And that's how we measure ourselves against.
And we
the
have
other
enough
local authorities.
capacity to do that in terms of people and in terms of structure. Leading question.
Well, I think we have, as with, to be honest, a lot of local authorities found this very difficult to deal with because it required complete new fields of information which weren't on existing IT systems. So all local authorities had to go out and get IT systems that could handle this new way of working and this new information that was being collected. And we in Newham have been working on that and have actually now kind of developed that with the existing system that we've got. But we would like to improve that so that it's more kind of intuitive. And we are working on quite clunky ways of extracting that data at the moment into much more kind of whizzy, kind of business intelligence type reports. So
Thank you.
It's still a work in progress.
Thanks.
But
I'll pass over to my learned friend. I think the chair has got the next one.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Yeah, I've got the next question for you, Candida. The service has been admitted to be rather slow to implement the changes required by the HRA, and you've already given us indications of many of the things being done. So I'll ask you specifically, what has been done to implement these changes in the context of the COVID-19 period, that is in the last 9 months, and how has the new funding streams and focus provided by the executive helped to drive this process?
Okay, I mean, Darren, do you want to say something about the COVID period? Or because just for everybody's information, I've been here for 6 weeks.
Yes.
So
over to your experienced colleagues.
So I think Darren might be better placed just to talk about some of that COVID activity, and then I can pick up after that.
Indeed, we'll come back to you. So we'll go over to you now, please, then, Darren.
So I think the key points about the COVID time was we moved from a predominantly face-to-face service to an online and by phone service. We closed Bridge House reception, and I think that transition went pretty smoothly. We still offered up, by exception, the opportunity for people to meet officers in person, and I think to date we've had 1, if 2 maximum requests to meet in person. Everybody else has been dealt effectively online or by phone, and I think that's been quite a significant transition, and has kind of happened in the background without much fanfare. The other key piece over the summer period was the government's policy of everyone in, and essentially that was to ensure that no one was left without accommodation during COVID. So we took on board, I think, around 130 singles that we placed in accommodation that we wouldn't have normally had a relief duty for. And that was a broad mix of, there was some sort of rough sleepers, ex-rough sleepers, some people with no recourse, and then some people who simply just didn't have a place to stay, but we wouldn't have deemed vulnerable. So as we've come out of lockdown, we're now working through finding them places to stay and move on accommodation. Within the funding that central government have made available, their focus has been on rough sleeping and rough sleeping services. So we've had a small portion of the funding that was made available to the council in order to help support move on the singles that we brought in under the Everyone In policy. But other than that, all of that funding is directed at rough sleeping rather than at people that we've accepted a duty for within temporary accommodation. And the key focus of all those funding streams has been rough sleeping. I think that's a fair summary. Does that answer the question, Joe?
It does. You pretty well answered the question. But has the have you been able to adequately cover the other forms of homelessness with this necessary extra focus on rough sleeping? Have you had the means to cover the other forms of homelessness during this period?
Yes, although I think what's been interesting for us, so the rough sleeping team within adult services have obviously done a fantastic job of finding people accommodation and getting people off the streets. I mean, as an aside, it's potentially created a whole new portfolio of temporary accommodation for rough sleeping going into the future that we'll have a liability for, which is probably a conversation for another day. Within homelessness, I think the key piece for us was that even though the government placed a ban on private sector evictions, and historically private sector evictions have accounted for around 40% of people that are presenting to us as homeless, what we found over the summer was that the numbers of people coming through the door remained the same, but the significant proportion of people were coming because of family breakdowns and being asked to leave by members of the family. So I think the concern we've got is that we're storing up a whole wave of private sector evictions come the next financial year. So when that private sector eviction ban was lifted in September, I think Canada, September, right?
Yeah, no, I think so.
It was with a 6 month notice period. So even if the landlord was going to evict the tenant, they had to give them a 6 month notice period. So there is the potential for a whole wave of people to come through the doors in April. And if they're coming on top of the current sort of supply, you know, that could increase significantly, even above what we've got at the moment, the number of people coming to us for help. Other authorities are predicting anything from 20 to 50% increase in homelessness presentations next year. Of course, we don't know. We don't know how the economy is going to fare and what the impact of that's going to be, but we are planning for a significant increase in demand. Candida, you had your hand up there.
Oh, well, yeah, sorry, just on that point, I thought I'd just give you an example of a couple of things where we have put a change of emphasis into prevention to try and address some of these issues that are coming up. So, for example, we're doing some early intervention work with a caseload of over 400 households who have come to us because they're threatened with losing their private sector tenancy. And we're working with them before they actually hit the stage where we owe them a duty to see whether we can do anything to sustain them in those tenancies. For example, with liaising with the landlords, helping hook them into services, sort out their benefits, even look at if a small contribution to their rent arrears would help with them kind of sustaining that tenancy. So that's something as an example of kind of how we've changed emphasis already on these things. And also we're working with the central data team with Housing Benefit and with MoneyWorks to do what we're calling a deep dive of people in the private rented sector to use all the data that's available to us in the council as a whole to try and identify households where they're going to be at risk of being threatened with homelessness because of this kind of all these things that we're experiencing through COVID. A lot more people applying for the universal credit, a lot more people in the private rented sector being benefit capped in recent months. We've got, I think it's over 100,000 households that are furloughed. etc., etc. So we're kind of, they're just examples of how we're trying to kind of proactively get in there upstream and prevent homelessness, and sort of delay or stop some of this increase in demand that we're expecting.
Thank you. It's good to know that you're anticipating this situation coming after March, and that would be a subject of one of our later questions. So you've answered that already. So thank you very much. And I'll now pass on to Jane, who has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and it does follow on very smoothly from what you've just been talking about. You partially touched it on rough sleeping, but I was going to ask how much you're working with adult social care, particularly in terms of prevention, but obviously in the other areas as well, in relief. And if there any more to say on rough sleeping, then you could expand on that.
Yeah, well, I can say that we're working very closely with social care. For a start, we have a short-term homelessness and rough sleeping strategy that runs out at the end of next year, and we're previously local, I don't know whether you know, but previously local authorities were required to have a homelessness strategy and they're required to have a rough sleeping strategy. But when the Homelessness Reduction Act came around, which was much more about dealing with everybody who was homeless rather than under the 1996 Act, we were generally looking at families and people with specific kind of health issues. They required councils to combine those strategies. So we're starting the work on the new strategy that will come out in 2022, and we're doing that with completely integrated way with our adult social care colleagues. I also sit in on their meetings that we have with the Ministry of Housing. And we're closely kind of working on kind of pathways between our services. So, for example, if people come in who are better, who should be supported by their service, how we kind of do that, and vice versa. We've got the legacy cases from COVID that we're also working on to move on from the accommodation that we've put them in into more secure accommodation. And we're also put in we've put in some joint bids for MHCLG money for money that will apply to single homeless people that we owe a duty to that aren't rough sleepers, as well as rough sleepers. So, for example, we've got one in at the moment, it's a bigger bid about hospital discharge for people who, people who need to be discharged from hospital, basically, who are homeless. But is to have basically a hospital discharge navigator post that will cross both services. And we've also got one in for refugees who are transitioning, so they're getting their status and they need housing. Now that could be for families or singles. It applies to both, and obviously we have a lot of rough sleepers who don't at the moment have status. So again, we're jointly kind of bidding for that. So we're doing a lot of work with them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Thank you, Jane. The next person with a question is Belgica, please.
Thank you, Chair. What work is planned to undertake early intervention with children's service to help reduce the risk of people become homeless in the long term?
Thank you,
Sorry,
Belgica.
I didn't hear the beginning. I heard something about integration with children's services to reduce homelessness, but I didn't hear the beginning bit of your question.
Okay, sorry. What work is planning to undertake early intervention with children's service? This was the beginning of the question.
Okay, so
thank you.
Thank you. as with adult social care, we are working with children's services on how we can work together in a more integrated way. I've got to be honest, and I've got to say that I think that we're more at the beginning of that journey than we are with adults, because I think that one of the things about COVID was that it meant that we were kind of flung together and developed really good relationships, particularly on the rough sleeping side of things and adult social care. But children's social care and housing, we both realised that we need to have a much more integrated approach. So we again meet regularly. We have a housing subgroup that's been set up. We are working with them on our young person's pathway protocol and trying to develop a pathway between the services for homeless young people. And we're also talking to them about how we can be better about our corporate parenting responsibility around care leavers and their housing as well. So there are a lot of things in the pipeline with children's social care.
And just to come in a little bit more on that, in terms of the corporate parenting responsibility, we're talking to them about going a little bit beyond just agreeing an annual quota of care leavers to house, in looking at what the need's going to be over the next 3 to 5 and 7 years, so that we can start building that into, if we're developing homes or we're looking at acquiring homes, we can build that into our future sort of acquisitions and supply strategy, so it's completely sort of integrated. And we did a really good piece of work with Children's over COVID when we assisted a lot of their households that were in accommodation with shared cooking facilities or no cooking facilities. We worked really closely to help rehouse those families into self-contained units. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting piece of work that we're doing with them going forward, I think.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Belgica. I'll now go on to Riaz for the next question, please.
Thank you, Chair. The question, I think, partly the answered earlier question. What I want to ask is, what partnership work does the service undertake with SEAP in prevention of homelessness, and what work has been undertaken with them to bring them into supporting the prevention and relief requirement with HRA? All right, do you hear me, John?
Thank you, Riaz.
Yeah, I heard you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so I mean, so I've outlined a bit of the partnership work that we've been doing with adults and children's social care, which are kind of two very key services. And it's not just one way kind of conversations about, well, how can housing kind of provide the bricks and mortar for people that they fling at us, if you see what I mean. It's also that conversation about that communication that they're having with people at an earlier stage about the realities of their housing and their options and kind of what that means for them, so that it's not that people get to a point where they're at a point of crisis and then again, like I said, they're coming to us when they're already homeless. It's that thing about raising awareness about housing and the reality of the housing situation in the borough, and kind of how can we do that through our partners as well. So this week, actually social care have been doing a joint strategic needs assessment, and looking at, which we were part of, where all the different services in the borough kind of coming together and looking at the kind of needs of children and young people in the borough from different kinds of perspectives, from health perspective, from mental health perspective, from housing perspective. And some of those conversations we were having was about, you know, housing is very central actually to a lot of those services, because if you don't have secure housing, you can't deliver those services into them. So rather than think of housing as something that's kind of you tag on to the end of whatever work you're doing with the people that you're supporting, you need to bring it in and think of it as a kind of central thing. So so that's some of the work we're doing.
I think that
particular
anyone who contacts the council, their expectation is that they be found accommodation. It's not that simple,
no,
because they have to go through the system. And you said earlier that you had 5,780 people in the temporary accommodation, reduced by 32. How long it would have taken you to do that? Because it's the first time I've ever heard, for some time, because it always goes up, but I've never known it to come down. And this is the first time. So well done. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Riaz.
Can we just clarify, though, that I thought the question was really about the voluntary community faith sector approach. And I don't know whether Candida heard that. It was about partnership working outside council structures.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were
no,
just
I
saying
mean, it's been
partnership.
difficult. It's nobody's fault. I just think that's where we were targeting that one, wasn't it, John? It was about partnership working on a wider sort of playing field.
It was.
Yeah.
So we are doing that as well. We have we're meeting regularly with the Homelessness Forum, which is chaired by Anchor House, Amanda Barry from Anchor House, and involves a lot of faith groups, homelessness advocate groups, and so on in the borough. And we're meeting with them on a regular basis. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody was saying
no,
something.
I don't know. We ought to go on mute as people.
Somebody, if people have got company, they perhaps need to mute.
And I think Councillor Mohammed wanted to say something actually about some of the things you've been doing.
Yeah, and also we have the Homeless Action Group, where we get people that residents that we work with on their homelessness, and we get different areas of different aspects of like we get DWP, different areas of homelessness and support for these residents. So it's regular bi-monthly meetings, and we look at issues that they raise, and we try to address them as well.
All right, thank you. Right, thank you very much.
Before we lose it, though, I just got this fascination. We've all got a duty as corporate parents, all of us. And I wonder where that's reported. I keep banging on about this. I think we've lost some of the reporting lines on that. And I don't know whether that was Lakmini's point as well.
Absolutely. I
thought you were going to read my mind on that.
Yes,
one.
I was going to.
We have been banging on about this over the years. Who are you reporting to? Because it's not just the executive and the mayor who have a responsibility. It's a council responsibility. Where does this get reported? Because I think we've lost some of that. I don't know whether Lakmini shares some of my concerns on that. I think
absolutely. That's
we'll go over to Matt Lakmini now then, yeah.
Sorry, I did indicate to come in after Belgica spoke. So Darren, you mentioned something really important. So all of us elected members here are corporate parents. You did mention that you're developing a housing strategy for care leavers. I thought there would be a strategy already. And also for care leavers, we have a responsibility for them until the age of 25. So
I was referring specifically to housing. So, you know, that children's services have a specific duty to those children and making sure they're adequately housed, etc., as they leave care leavers. What I was talking about is integrating our housing strategy into the responsibility that children's services have. So at the moment, within our allocations policy, for example, we provide a quota of properties that we will make available to care leavers each year. What the work that Candida and I are doing is to look beyond that and to think what will be the needs of children's services and of care leavers for the next 5 years. How many care leavers are coming out of care over the next 5 years, and how can we then build that into our affordable homes program, for example? Or we're one of the work streams Candida and I are looking at is an acquisitions and supply strategy, not just for temporary accommodation, but for wider supply. And so if we know the needs of the children's services and they're going to need X number of properties over the next 3 to 5 years, we can start building that into our future plans as we try and create more supply. So it's fully integrated. And that may well be, if we're looking at a new development, we ensure that X number of that new development are specifically for care leavers. So it's that building it into our sort of strategic thinking as opposed to just our sort of annual planning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. It's over to you, Lakmini, for your question. Perhaps you can just ask one element of that question, though, because we want to give Zubair a turn, and then we need to get on to perhaps the second part of our programme for tonight. So could you perhaps just ask the first part of your question, please? A single aspect. But you're muted at the moment.
When preventing homelessness, what housing advice services are offered to residents in need? How accessible are these services? So if I further elaborate, I don't know whether my colleagues share this with me, where when people come to our surgeries, they say the officers have asked them to bring an eviction order from the court. And that's the time they can go and get housing advice. So I'm just trying to understand, if you're saying you're trying to prevent homelessness, and if you're saying bring a eviction order, what's the correlation there? So I want some information on that or clarification.
Okay, so I have to say that it's been a very bad habit of some homelessness services that they would, when people were being evicted, basically, they would advise people, because that accommodation is still available for you, stay in that accommodation until you were evicted and then come to us. Now, that might be one of the things that you're referring to there. And I think, historically, that has happened. Now, the whole point about the Homelessness Reduction Act and the preventing homelessness part of that is that we have a duty to prevent that homelessness, okay? So we can't be saying, well, just wait there and then come to us when you're homeless. What we can do is we can carry out that prevention activity while they're still in that, and kind of flex that period. If people have been served with a Section 21, you are actually allowed to flex that 56-day period if it's reasonable. But that's what I was alluding to before when I said we've got a caseload of 450 odd cases at the moment that we're actively got a team working through, ringing those people up, saying, what's your circumstances at the moment? Why are you being served with a Section 21? Can we liaise with your landlord? Is it because of rent arrears? Have you had problems getting your benefits? Do you need employment support? We'll refer you to MoneyWorks. Is it because you need financial advice? Is it because you're in debt and you need advice about consolidating your debt? Those kind of things. So that's what I'm saying about changing our focus and restructuring our service to move from being a very old-fashioned sort of Housing Act 1996 service to a Homelessness Reduction Act 2017 prevention focused service. And that is a cultural change. So, I mean, I think you could, from the reduction of temporary accommodation numbers, and, you know, obviously that's a sort of 1 month in time, so we don't want to over egg them, but I think that you can see that change is happening, but still for the whole service and for people who have been working in a certain way for a certain time, it will take time for that to fully be integrated, and it needs to be backed up as well with a slight structural change to how the teams are put together as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask a supplementary, which is relevant to this question, but it's more political question?
Well, if it's political, perhaps not.
Okay.
If it's political, and we'll just go on to
No,
Zubir
in a sense, I wanted the political lead to answer this question. No, not political.
Well, we'll give him a chance. If the political lead, if Shabs can bear that in mind, we'll take it in the second part where he's gonna take the lead on it. Yep. So you can come back on that, Lakmini. But we'll go now to Zubir for his question, please. I'm just looking for Zubir.
He's on mute.
You're on mute, Zubir.
Yeah, did you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, what are the projection of number of those homeless in the borough currently and in the future, and are the affordable home target that are set currently sufficient to the meet those projection? Have projections been altered follow COVID-19 and the link economic hardship to come?
Thank you.
Did you got my questions?
Yep, yep. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take the first part, Candice, and I'll take the second?
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay, sorry, because that was quite a lot packed into that question. So I think Darren's going to, there's something about the affordable homes programme in there, and Darren will answer that. So the other part of your question, sorry, can you repeat? It was about projections of homelessness, or was it about how projections of homelessness have fed into the affordable homes programme? Yeah,
this is a process of the number of those homeless in the borough currently in the future.
Right.
I think this is about how you see the numbers increasing in the future, the evolution of the numbers.
Yeah.
So I think, as Darren kind of touched on previously, it's really hard for us to know kind of what those numbers are, because of all of the and you mentioned it, COVID, sort of because of all the COVID related circumstances that are happening. It's very, very difficult for us to predict, because we've got, for example, we know there are a cohort of people who haven't been evicted, who would probably usually have been evicted and come to us because the evictions have been suspended. But unfortunately, there's no way of us knowing about those because the courts won't share that information with us. We've got a number of people who are furloughed, but we don't know whether they specifically might be in rent arrears or in the private sector, you know. So we've got a number of kind of red flags, I suppose, where we think, yes, this is going to be an increase in homelessness, but it's very difficult to predict what those specific numbers are going to be. So I mentioned the deep dive that we're doing previously, which is hopefully going to give us an idea of a particular cohort, but they're people who are on benefits and various kind of data that we can use. But there could be people, you know, outside of that. But as Darren said previously, other local authorities are predicting between 25% and 50% increase in homelessness.
So numbers of current presentations, I think around the 4,500 a year. Is that about right?
Yes, and as Darren said earlier as well, through this period, we haven't seen a big increase in people applying to us, actually. What we've seen is a kind of a swing from what would have been more families has been more single people. So an increase in single people approaching us that we've put into temporary accommodation. So what that's saying to me is that those families that would have come are there somewhere and kind of and waiting to come to us. So we are still doing we're still kind of doing some number crunching and things to try and get a better idea about it.
But I suppose if you just take a straight line projection, if we have 4,500 people seeking assistance a year, only a proportion of those end up in temporary accommodation because we try and assist them, as the majority of those before they need temporary accommodation. If that increases by 25%, that's another 1,000 people presenting. So you can see quite instantly how dramatic that impact could be, and that's why at the moment we're fast tracking all of these changes to the service, because we need them in place by April so that we can try and manage that impact going into next year. And the work that the team are doing in preemptively contacting these 400 households that we know are in the private sector, we know at risk, is around preventing those people as needing temporary accommodation come April or May. And prior to making this type of service change, they would be the people that would pop up needing temporary accommodation. The other part of the question was around the Affordable Homes Programme. I think we're just out to consultation on a housing delivery strategy, which sets out the first steps of the next 3 to 5 years of delivery. And the Affordable Homes Programme is a part of that. 1,000 new homes over the course of the next 3 to 4 years will make a big difference. There are regeneration schemes in Custom House and Carpenters that we're aware of that we're working hard to get off the ground and to start moving over the next few years. But those alone won't solve this. So another big piece of work we're doing is developing an acquisitions and supply strategy. And that's talking to other partners around whether we can help enable development elsewhere. We're working with Populo to try and find innovative solutions to new supply. One of those being a rooftop development programme, which was approved at Cabinet earlier this month, which is exploring putting sort of 1 to 2 additional stories on low-rise buildings. There's only 1 or 2 other councils that have done that so far, but it's a really innovative solution, and actually you can provide accommodation at a fairly reasonable rate per unit. We're looking at acquisitions. So we're talking to a number of different sort of funders around whether there's the potential for funding institutions to fund a programme of acquisitions. We're already working to market the acquisition of leasehold properties that were sold under right to buy, but they've gone past their 5-year period of having to return the discount, and we've got a programme of buying those properties back using right to buy receipts. So we're at the moment just exploring as many different ways as we can of introducing more supply of accommodation. The other part of this, we touched on this, is around the private rented sector. We have the biggest private rented sector in London. When you look at the number of people we prevent homelessness to by discharging into the private sector, it's around 26% of people that have come to us. Many other London boroughs are at 50% or even higher, because they've got that relationship with the private sector. So there's a big piece of work they're doing to re-engage with the private sector, landlords, and have a relationship with them that will allow us to prevent people from becoming homeless. So there's a whole wide range of initiatives at the other end, which is the supply. I hope that answers the question.
Well, thank you, Darren. That's a very creative and wide-ranging programme. Very exciting. I can just see this will be our last question on this area. I can see Neil, Councillor Wilson's hand, so I'll let him come in.
Well, it was actually like meaning just before we round this off, because it's an operational question rather than a political one. I think on the second part of where you were with that meaning, it's just, I'm interested about co-production and co-development of advice services, because we've been banging on for years how important that is. I mean, I'm the mental health champion. That, you know, we don't just talk about things being done to people, but with people. So are the housing advice offers, which, you know, we've rightly said publicly here, we need to improve. It's culture sometimes about, you know, wait till you're actually evicted sort of stuff. Are there those housing advice offers being co-developed or co-produced with those who have been required it in the past? In other words, have come through our systems? Are we looking at, you know, because we're quite innovative, as Darren said. I think we are doing this, but I think we just ought to have it on public record. But Shabs has indicated it might be best in the political section. I don't know.
No, I was just going to say, do you mean like TA forums?
No, in terms of if you've come for advice and you've the housing advice offers, are they being developed with those who've required it in the past? So, you know, they presented, say, last year. Are we using them as sort of like case studies or helping shape the service by consulting them on the way forward?
Yeah, no, I think we are. We do. I think we're currently looking at areas of that and trying to implement that as well. So we are.
Yeah, it's about getting experience of those that have gone through the process, isn't it?
Yes. Because I think, you know,
if I'm being a bit clumsy the way I'm asking it, but
yeah, because you know, with the Homeless Action Group that I co-chair with, we've got Peter. I co-chair with a resident who's got lived-in experience. So you know, at the end of the day, it's about looking at their views and addressing the issues as well. So we look when we do our engagement, we engage with all, you know, people with lived-in experience to understand that the real issues they face and the challenges we're going to face at a later stage.
And just an observation, Chair, that, you know, throughout this discussion, there's been, you know, this, you know, need for us to go to more preventative work. I'm reminded of the fact that over the years, you know, the people who often miss out are those who are not articulate, who don't know the way around the system, are single, are sort of new to London or new to the UK, or, you know, don't have the support networks. And it's about how people who've gone through sometimes quite traumatic stuff have actually still come out in a reasonable place, not necessarily an ideal place, but a far better place. And that might be a reassurance to people who are still coming in on that journey. Does that make sense?
To see how they can prosper with the system.
But the whole system is not against them, because it can be very bureaucratic and frightening for people, I think.
There needs to be good examples of that, to encourage people. Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, thank you. Shabs has got the floor now, and we're going to ask him because Councillor Mahmood has recently stepped up to become lead for housing services, and he's had a look at the whole situation from his new position, I'm sure, and we're going to ask him what his priorities are and give him about 10 minutes to talk about these, and then we'll have questions. Now, if there are any burning questions on the first part that you haven't been able to ask, and there may be, we can put them in after Shabs' presentation, right? Because we will have time still to ask him a number of questions about his priorities. So, Shabs, would you like to tell us how you see the priorities of your area now?
Yeah, I'm going to start from my housing perspective, and as you know, housing is a very, very big beast in the council, and I think we've been really working hard to turn this beast around and get it functioning. I think one of my first priorities would be TA reduction, and I think we just talked about that, but I think, you know, it's really essential that we work on the prevention side, and you know, at the end of the day, I see the TA numbers are going up each time, and I think, you know, that is really worrying, but I'm optimistic that we've got some really good work streams being put in place, and if those work streams get those work streams going, I can see our TA numbers going down. And I think the the next element is implementing our, obviously we've put the allocations policy out to consultation and actually seen that through, because at the end of the day, I think again, we need to prioritise our needs. We need to look at areas, obviously at the moment with the new allocations policy, it's going to be needs based, it's going to be on overcrowding. So, I mean, and also the fact is that currently our current allocations policy is quite generous, because obviously we have a 2-year, so if you live in the borough for 2 years, you can be entitled to social housing. I think our neighbouring boroughs are 5 and 7. So this makes Newham a big attraction for social housing, for people to come in, because they can get on the waiting list, or they can live in the borough for 2 years and next minute they're on our waiting list. So this is led to large increase. So with the allocations policy, we are looking to just increase it by that 1 year. Like that 1 year could, at the end of the day, it could mean a small reduction as well. But at the end of the day, that's the real issue there. Darren, do you want to talk about the allocations policy?
Yeah, very happy to. So I think we brought the allocations policy to the commission last time. We're currently in the midst of the consultation process. We've had quite a number of engagement sessions with stakeholders such as the Homelessness Forum and the Homelessness Action Forum. The last time I checked with the agency, we'd had well over 3,000 written responses from people on the waiting list in response to it, so which was really, really pleasing. So there's been a lot of engagement. I think that we're still in the place where the majority of people support it, although there's obviously concerns being raised by people on the waiting list that may be impacted by it, such as those that are employed that will no longer have the priority that they currently enjoy. But generally it's been very positively received. One of the key pieces of feedback from some of the workshops has been around our offer for people who are working but in low income households, and what our offer of sort of intermediary housing would be, or key worker housing if it's the traditional sort of way of phrasing it. So that is something that we're going to look at in the next calendar year of what's the housing offer for those people that can't afford to buy but don't qualify for council tenancies. Yeah, so going well the consultation.
And the other thing I was going to look at is building on tenant engagement. I think the last time I came in front of you, we talked about the tenant leaseholder forums and the work we were doing with our tenant leaseholders. So we want to really, really build on that. And I think because COVID is stopped a lot of that good work that we were going to implement. But I was looking at, housing hubs, HLOs, working on a tenants charter, so a service level agreement for tenants that live in social housing, in council accommodation, of what they expect the council to provide them in terms of service. So it'd be things like the ASB, repairs and maintenance. So these are quite key for me. And the estate management, better management of the estate. So we're really, really keen on that. And also on the other side is what we expect our tenants of them when they live in our properties, what we expect from them as well. So that was one of the other areas. Darren touched on airspace projects, but we're really keen to build more social housing and use innovation. So the modular house building, I think me and you, Councillor Whitworth, we went to Norwich that time to look at future build. So
a very memorable day, yes.
Yeah. So these sort of innovations, we want to look. At the end of the day, my vision for housing services is that we want to be the beacon that everyone looks to, and we want to develop good technology, good innovation to implement into housing services. The other areas are making housing services go digital. I believe at the end of the day, everyone's got a smartphone. We need to actually bring housing services into the 21st century and look at base building apps around housing, tenant leaseholder forum. So reporting of repairs, reporting of ASB on the estates can be done a lot more quicker, fast and effective. Building a better relationship with our housing associations, RPs. That is key as well, because obviously if we want to reduce our waiting list, it's also about building that relationship with the housing associations in the borough, developing partnerships with them, looking at, obviously we're a borough with loads of land, working with them to develop partnerships in social housing. The other thing was, at the moment we're, major works on our developments, on our housing estates, improving the repair service. I think that is key to me as well. One of the other areas is PRS licensing. We want landlords to be accredited, and we want to do an accreditation scheme in the borough and making sure that we have good landlords and offering good quality accommodation to their tenants. The other thing was that we're also in talks with London Residential Landlord Association. We want to work with groups like the Renters Union to understand the issues renters face, and also the issue that landlords face, and work with them to implement that. One of the other key areas that I'm very, very keen on is green energy. For our council estates, obviously 2025, we're going to have to get rid of gas boilers on so we're going to have to look at alternative energies. So solar power, heat source pump energy. At the end of the day, we want to reduce costs to our tenants. So, one of the biggest thing is fuel poverty. We want to address fuel poverty, and I think, I know it's a big list, but hopefully, we want to work towards trying to implement at least some of that by 2022.
Well, thank you very much, Shabs. Yes, it's an impressive list of priorities there. It's all important, I think. Yeah. And
I think at the end of the day, look, it's very important. And I think, even with TA reduction, what we've been doing in the past, we've had a crack in the wall and we've been filling in with filler, but not actually looking at the real cause of the crack. So at the end of the day, these are the areas that what we're trying to do with the prevention stuff and all the areas of TA. You want a permanent fix and address the issues rather than do a temporary fix. That's what we're constantly been doing.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sound approach. Yeah, well, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm going to look to see now to ask our commission members to ask questions, and I'm just going to look for hands and try and give you all a fair run at this. I see Riaz, Lakmini, Jane,
Neil Wilson,
and Neil. Yeah.
Yeah, take it in that order. I've said enough already. So.
No
comment. You ran out of time.
Riaz is first, then, please.
Exactly.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Councillor Sharp that does he know how many properties are in Newham which are not licensed, private properties?
Not licensed. I can't. And I'll be honest with you, I can't answer that at the moment.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. That's an honest answer.
Answers are always appreciated.
That's all right. Thank you.
Chair.
Lakmini, yeah.
So my question was supposed to be from the previous session. So
that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Shabs. I have to say, very ambitious program you've got in mind. Really great stuff. It was quite evident from Candida's presentation that historical practices of homelessness prevention was done according to the 1996 HRA Act, right? So the current act came in 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it was came into effect on 3rd of April 2018. As the lead for housing, what are the priorities? I know you stated a lot of priorities, but when you compare the two acts, what are the priorities for you to prevent homelessness in Newham? So if I give you an example, if you take a place like South Kensington, private sector evictions would be very less there. But a place like Newham would be a massive priority. So what have you identified as how you would prevent homelessness in Newham? But what are the priorities? What is affecting our people to become homeless?
I think that one of the big priorities is probably the rents, high rents. At the end of the day, it's affordability. And again, it's employment in the borough as well. So, you know, and I think politically, I think I think budget, the benefit caps as well, that stops a lot of residents actually staying in the borough. So I think politically for me, prevention is key. And I think what Candida outlined, I think, you know, early intervention is always key. I think, you know, as we pointed out with the Section 21s, and, you know, when I first became a councillor, and from lived in experience, I had a resident that came to me with Section 21, and I panicked. You know, I thought this person was going to be homeless straight away, and I didn't understand what Section 21 was until I rang up a colleague and said, look at the date, it's got a date on it, and I didn't realise. But you understand, I think we have to really work hard on prevention at early stage to, you know, and look at it and work with landlords. I think, you know, again, it's if we can get prevention right, we can get a lot of things right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jane.
Right, thank you. Yes, that's halfway to my answer. I was wondering what you see as the biggest challenge to reducing temporary accommodation, and the poor quality of so much. Thinking of what you're saying about cracks in the wall and how you just sort it. How do you see yourself challenging that?
Well, I think at the moment, I think, you know, what I've seen of it, I think we just got to get our strategies better. I think we've got to work with, you know, at the end of the day, get our work streams right. I think at the end of the day, we've got loads of acquisitions in the pipeline. We need to actually get those acquisitions through and develop those. So, i.e., at the end of the day, you know, you're on about high rents, right? High levels of rent in the borough. But if we can get, at the moment, we've got some leasing deals. So if we can get some of those leasing deals through, you know, they could provide us 400 units of much needed accommodation in the borough, and it's brand new accommodation. So I think if temporary accommodation starts going down and we start using leasing deals and working with our partners like Local Space Better, then, you know, at the end of the day, that could actually help us with landlords that have properties in the borough, because a lot of them, you know, I think our most expensive accommodation is nightly paid. So if we can get those right, then, you know, it all falls into place. And I think the other issue here is, I think, you know, we mentioned it in the budget, is converting, you know, our nightly paid accommodation into short hold tenancies. So I think, you know, these are the areas that we've got to really look at and get done.
Yes, once you start moving, you can.
Yeah, but I think, you know, like I said to you, I think for a long time, especially in TA, we've never focused on prevention. I think prevention is key. If you look at what Candy said, we've got 400 live cases. So if you do half of those, if you stop 200 preventions, that's 200 less people coming into temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't say it, but Darren and Candida are welcome to chip in with additional comments when they wish. Right? Thank you. Thank you, Jane. Now we've got a question, another question from Neil, please.
Yeah, mine was on tenant engagement. After a long hiatus, we had some really good initiatives. They were sadly derailed, in my opinion, by the COVID thing, because I think it's quite important if we do have tabletop discussions. I think we're is that too trendy a phrase? I know everybody has to now go into deep diving and going into swimming pools, etc. But where we had tabletop discussions where people could meet and yes, moan in front of elected members as well as housing officers, Shabs. Remember in that sort of East Ham Town Hall, etc.
And at the end of the day,
how whether in this new world, I don't think we're ever going to go back to necessarily the sort of like open forum, but I would like both really. How do you see that developing? And along with that, if I may, Chair, because you know, where we've done site visits, etc. Or it's not us, it's highways, or it's not us, it's somebody else. Do you feel that we've got a more corporate response to people who are on our estates and our tenants? You know, about road near them, you know, and all of that.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with that one. Yeah.
Neil, I think definitely we have, and like I said to you, I think it's our relationship. Don't forget, you know, when we done these forums almost a year ago, it was you know, almost 9 years of non-engagement with our residents. 9 years of not actually understanding the issues on those estates. So you can imagine when we've done these forums, the feedback we got, and I think you attended both of them, and you can see the chemistry, because the first one that we done, we didn't have much of a take up, but the second one, it was literally, you know, it was so filled up, and at the end of the day, it's literally going back to the future, because obviously, you know, housing hubs, all the things we talked about, the call service, RMS, estate, you know, at the end of the day, what you got to understand, you know, some of our estates, they really, really need a makeover. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's that environment that we want young kids growing up on those estates. We want to improve their environment. We want to, you know, at the end of the day, build up the tenants associations that we had in the borough. I think that they're key. And I think residents, tenant leaseholder voices are more important, because they can actually give you the input that you need to develop a real good housing service.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that Minnie wants to come in on that one. I keep anticipating where she wants to come in.
I'm just looking for, like Minnie, she's welcome to come in. I'm just looking for any more hands.
It's if there's no
She's
one
gone
else.
off my screen. Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Yes.
If there's no one else,
You can come in now, like Minnie.
Okay, yeah. So it's a question on the gas boilers you mentioned, Shabs. So by 2025, you're going to replace the boilers. So that's what?
Yeah. There's going to be a program. I think Darren, is it government legislation?
Yeah, it's a climate change program. By 2025, we'll be implementing a program of replacement with an alternative.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I thought you had to replace the boilers by 2025.
No.
I think within the I know. I panicked as well, Candice. No, I think within the climate change objectives that the mayor set out, we put a commitment to have that program running and a suitable alternative found. I mean, it is a big challenge because, you know, it's thousands and thousands of properties. So
and can I just add? Can I add to that? Obviously, you know, we're doing the airspace project, and obviously we're going to be retrofitting a lot of our existing estates, and at the end of the day, energy efficiency is going to be probably key to that. And at the end of the day, we want, you know, fuel poverty is key also, because I think a lot of residents that live on those estates do face fuel poverty. So what we got to physically understand is this disposable income. Yeah. So obviously when you take your rent out and everything else out, that disposable income, and a lot of people on council estates, you know, they are faced with high fuel costs. So we need to make their lives easier. And I think when we start doing the aerospace program, I think we're looking at retrofitting, putting green energy in those. And I think that's going to really, really transform the lives of a lot of those people, a lot of our residents.
What methods are you using then in that case? If you're not using gas boilers, I'm just inquisitive to know.
Heat source pumps, and solar powers. Whatever technology is available. I think when me and John went to the future build development in Norwich, they had heat source pumps, so and solar paneling as well.
And the other thing, so for new developments, one of the things the GLA want us to explore is a lot more around district heating. So I don't know if you remember years ago, but people used to develop blocks with communal heating and communal heating pumps. That's something that we're going to be revisiting because it's a lot more energy efficient. So there's a whole range of options at the moment that are being explored, and there's lots of people in the market trying to be innovative, because if somebody can find a solution, they're gonna make a shed load of money, I think.
Yeah. And also we've had a couple of approaches as well from companies that deal with green energy. So again, you know, we're looking at opening a door and being innovative. So we want to, obviously, I want to look to the future and actually implement some of those changes into our building program.
Indeed, that's the right way forward, I'm sure. I've got a question now. I'd like to ask it because it's a major problem we have with our residents, and a long-standing problem about the performance of the repairs and maintenance service, because we still get people contacting us saying that electrician was due to come one day and they didn't come, or that the plumber was due to come another day and a carpenter turned up. Somebody did a half a job and never came back. I'm afraid we still get a lot of this. It may only be a fraction of the total, but it is still quite considerable. So really, the question is quite a general question, really. What are you doing really to improve the performance of the RMS?
So I can partly address that. I think at the moment that they are going partly digital. So they are bringing a computer system that to make all that sort of those complaints more, you know, non-existent. So at the end of the day, I think we got two areas to attack that from, is, you know, the call centre and also RMS itself, because I think sometimes for me the biggest complaint I get is residents ringing up and not getting through, and when they do get through, it's always the wrong person turning up, so I think what we're looking at is working on the call centre and working on these areas in RMS, trying to get make it more efficient, you know, make it open, you know, looking at these areas, and just we're looking at service improvement all the time, John. I think it's key, and you know, and developing the service as well. So like I said to you, we are looking at going digital and bringing in a system that works for everyone and makes these little mistakes that happen non-existent.
That sounds like a good thing, because with digital equipment, you can keep an eye on what everybody's doing, can't you?
And I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one of the innovations I looked at. You know, I've been looking at this for a long time, and we had a company coming in. It was about language. Obviously, we're a multi-diverse borough, but everyone does have a smartphone. So, in that innovation, you know, that program could talk to our residents in the languages that they need. So a person who don't speak English, but you know, you could convert the program to understand. So when they are logging in a repair, they understand what the repair is and who is it going to. So the user interface is really good, and we have to get that right.
Yeah, I'm sure that will go quite a long way to solving the problems, because it's a problem of communication within the service very often, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that one is coming.
Yeah, no, I was just going to build on that point. It's funny because a repair, you know, should be the simplest process, shouldn't it? You know, that the resident either phones up or goes online, book the repair, you turn up, do the job, and leave. And but there are so many points of failure in that very simple process, and quite often the plumber not turning up to the job is as a result of something else that happened along the way. So it's not just about RMS. There's the contact centre. You know, they take the call. They're the first point of contact. They will diagnose the repair and then they will issue the order. It may go, there's the surveying team within technical services who may be dealing with a complex repair to go out and survey it and make sure that the job's being done and specified right. There's also the piece around capital investment. I think the stock's been underinvested in over a number of years, and so we're putting together a significant planned maintenance program to roll into the next few years so we can start tackling some of this long-standing stuff. But you're right, you don't have to have a large percentage of jobs go wrong to create a huge amount of noise. So to give you an example, we probably do around 60,000 individual sort of jobs and orders a year. Even if you are running at 90% satisfaction, that's 6,000 jobs a year that you're not quite getting right, which is 500 jobs a month, which is probably 100 to 125 jobs a week that you're not getting right. Now that can cause an awful lot of noise, and that's a service running at 90% satisfaction and we're not there. So we're pulling together a kind of cross-business repairs review panel that brings together all the different people from all the different parts of the council, and it's just a case of systematically identifying root causes, removing them, and then moving on. And it's a long process, but it's part system and process. It's part organisation and operating model, but then there's a massive lump of culture there and a massive lump of, you know, making the customer right at the heart of everything we do.
And Chair, sometimes I can understand your frustration because, you know, when I first came in May, I think, you know, I had a resident come in and it took me 22 emails just to get his repair sorted. So you can, you know, and obviously when I became the deputy, it completely changed. Yeah, you understand, I was literally picking at straws every day with the amount of residents give me casework and disrepair cases. So this is hence why we did do the tenant leaseholder forums, for me to get a better understanding of where the service is at and how we can improve it.
And the other thing is we just need to get a lot better at sorting stuff out when it's gone wrong. You know, there's an awful lot of work that's carried out without anything going wrong, but it doesn't get seen. But where things do unravel, I describe it as passing the parcel. You see people around the business kind of passing the problem between them, and it's just creating single points of accountability and then dealing with the issue when it comes up, and getting quicker and smoother at doing that.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, I can see you've got a good appreciation of the problems there, and you've got systems in place now that can help turn the ship around, because operation like that does take time. But of course, we're eagerly waiting for to see what's happening. But I can see you're on the case. So,
John, let me give you a guarantee. I was just going to say to you at the end of the day, you know, I could give you a guarantee we are going to turn that ship around. We're working really, really hard at trying to get things right. And I think this year, because of COVID, I think it's slowed us down a bit. But the work streams and all our, you know, with the tenant engagement teams, they're all in place. After Christmas, you should see a real shift in what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. So, you know, there's going to be some real transformation work. One of the things I'm quite keen on is working with universities. So obviously, I think, John, we've been in talks with UEL for a long time, and it's about getting, you know, they've got a great building college right next door, and it's about bringing those partners in and bringing the knowledge of those students in and working with them, because obviously they can help us design the future as well.
That's an exciting prospect, isn't it? And at that point, I think I will close this now.
Sorry,
because your hand wasn't up 30 seconds ago.
It was. It's been up and down. I've been waving like mad for about 3 minutes. John.
Well, look, we'll have yours as the last one then, Neil.
Is that all right? Mine is very brief. Great stuff. Whether it's on, and what was the figure, Darren? 60,000 or 600,000?
60,000.
Yeah, exactly. But even if it was just
It
six,
feels like 600 sometimes.
exactly. Even if it was just six, I was reminded of when both you and Shab's talking about, are we, you know, part of the evaluation obviously comes to us, and when it goes wrong, it goes to us on those of us on audit or, you know, internal audit. But do we have a review mechanism that you're building in? So Shabs has got tenant, you know, satisfaction surveys, etc., things like that, so that we as members can actually get some of the good news stories, because I think we get a deficit model if we're not careful, because it rightly comes to members when things go wrong. It's like, when we're getting it right, do we have that piece ready in terms of, you know, you said we listened, we did, you know, that sort of comms piece, but also an evaluation of, you know, are the statistics going up? That may be reported at executive level, but I'm banging on again, it would be helpful because scrutiny needs to know what figures are being produced for the executive.
Yeah. Very good point, Neil. Thank you.
And you know,
that can just lie in the ether. You don't have to answer it necessarily, but we'll come back to you and demand it next time.
We could, as I say, maybe we could come back to that later next calendar year.
Yeah, we look forward to that. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be
flagging that up, Chair. That was one of my red warning flags.
A good point to flag up. Yeah. Well, we've just got one more item, so we'll thank our witnesses today for a very thorough and interesting account of their work, and exciting program, and a lot of work to do. But we can see that you're well engaged, and I think we all appreciated it. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Chair, and and Merry Christmas to all my councillor colleagues if I don't see you again.
Thank you. The same to you, Shabs.
And to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, officers.
Right, all that remains to do is to have a look at our forward plan, which is, I think my screen is now gone and I can no longer see it. So I'm going blind. But we've got a forward plan which mentions the first quarter, the meeting in the first quarter of next year. And I'm going blind, but I can remember that we've got the greening of the council fleet. We've got an account of an update on Carpenter's estate, which is going to be, there'll be some developments by then, and that actually is going to be, the mayor is going to come up for that. Actually, she has agreed to come. It'll be the mayor, and she will also talk about the construction of affordable housing. And I think there's one more item, isn't there, for the first quarter? What was that, Richard?
Allocation.
I can cover that. Yes, so the an update on the housing allocations review and housing strategy.
Oh yes, with the results of the consultation. Yeah, thank you, Richard. That was the other point. So,
affordable housing programme on the sheet I've got.
Yeah, affordable housing.
Yeah, Councillor Whitworth mentioned that as part. So it's going to be that and the Carpenter's estate. So they're quite well.
Yeah, the mayor will be talking about both those topics.
And then we've got the green fleet coming in, so we are doing the environmental stuff. Is that all going to be?
We haven't totally forgotten the environmental stuff now.
Is that all good? That's marvelous. You know, I did flag this up, John. I did warn you in the pre-meet. How are we going to have that all? That's just in quarter one. So how many meetings are we envisaging over that?
So just thinking about that, so there'll be the AGM. So it's four meetings per year. So.
We should get another one in. We really want 2 meetings before May, don't we?
I think so. Is that when the AGM is, Jane?
Yes, I believe so.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, because, you know, that's been moved around because of various issues. But yeah. So we should get that through. Yeah?
If we can look at one in February and one in April, perhaps, Richard?
Yeah, I can look into that. No problem.
I think that's all it was, to be aiming for.
You know, I think that's an important one about greening the fleet. We've been talking about that, about air quality, but it's also about how we might link the environmental stuff that we've done on the air quality to other issues around the transport network program. I'm making allusions to not just the Green Fleet, but I don't want to keep on about low traffic neighbourhoods or parking permits, because I think we can talk ourselves out.
We've still got work to do on that. That's not going to go away.
That ain't going to go away. People and parking permits. I don't really want to hear any more about parking permits. You can tell we're getting tired. Parking permits. But I don't know whether other colleagues feel the same. I just think that it's not just the Green Fleet Management Strategy that we could talk about if we got 2 meetings. It was about how we might broaden up on the other environmental issues, John. That was all.
Yes, I think we do need, because we did a lot of environment 2 years ago, and then we sort of switched over to housing and regen, and we haven't yet got back to the environment. We were going to have them at this meeting, but developments had not gone far enough, so that's why we put it back. But yeah, let's think of some environmental topics for April. I think that would be good for the members to keep in mind and come forward perhaps with some suggestions.
Yeah, I'm not asking us all to be very innovative now. I just thought, because I think we're all tired, and it's just thinking ahead. And sometimes
that's something for the members to think of and
sometimes you think of it, don't you? You think of it all tangentially, on a completely different topic when you're sitting listening to something else, and you think, oh yeah, we could do that one. I don't know whether others agree.
We'll put much of the focus then on if we can have a second meeting, as I hope we can in April, we can give that more of an environmental focus. I think that would be a good thing.
We've got to watch the pre-election period. I refuse to use that word beginning with P, because I think it's got so many overtones. The pre-election period.
Yes.
Council is the 24th of May.
Sorry?
Council is the 24th of May.
And when does the pre-election period come in, Richard? Have you got a date yet?
For Perdo, do you mean?
Yeah, I'm not using that word.
I think it's
the word that
7 weeks before.
Neil avoids.
Well, and you, John, this association is not good. But,
I know what you mean, yeah.
I can't remember.
Sorry, Chair, it's 9 o'clock now. It's just gone past.
All right.
Right. Yep. We'll have to we must finish now.
Yep.
And we've got action points at the end of the pack, which just need to be looked at. The action points are all ongoing, and and the dates are indicated. So I think that's taken care of. So I think there's is there anything else to add before we close? I haven't forgotten everything. Well, I'd just like to thank you all. I'd like to thank all the members of the commission, of course, and Richard and Adrian for their support. All right, and I'll also wish you all a Merry Christmas if I don't see you again, or I probably will. But wishing you all the best for the season. All right.
Thank you,
Bye,
Chair.
everybody.